You think it makes them respect you. The car, the watch, the flex, the subtle name drop, the performance of success. But beneath every act of showing off lies one brutal truth. You don't believe you are enough without it. Machiavelli would have seen right through you. He knew power doesn't reveal itself, it conceals. The man who must prove his worth has already surrendered it. Because true influence whispers. It doesn't scream. It plants itself in silence and grows in the minds of others when you're not around. But here's the part that stings. You don't even realize you're doing it. That desperate need to be seen, to be validated, to be admired. It isn't confidence. It's the phantom echo of being overlooked, ignored, forgotten. It's the child who never felt chosen. And now, you've built your identity not around who you are, but around what others must think you are. Every gesture becomes a transaction. Every interaction a sales pitch. You're not connecting, you're convincing. Convincing others so you can convince yourself. But what if I told you this impulse, the very thing you believe makes you powerful, is the thing that is silently dismantling your presence, your respect, and your influence? Not because people dislike confidence. Number confidence is magnetic. But when confidence becomes performance, people feel it, even if they can't explain it. And somewhere deep inside, they begin to pull away. Something feels off, because it is. You see, Machiavelli understood a secret most men never grasp. He knew that invisibility is sometimes more powerful than presence. That mystery is more seductive than exhibition. That control is never announced. It's exercised, quietly, strategically, with restraint so perfect it doesn't look like restraint at all. But your ego is loud. It demands to be recognized. And so you keep showing them who you are, never realizing that the more you show, the less they believe. There's a paradox at play here, one that governs power, psychology, and perception itself. And if you don't understand it, if you don't master it, you will keep chasing admiration while repelling respect. You will keep building images while eroding your essence. And worst of all, you will never be free. Because what you're really doing is not showing off. You're pleading to be seen, to be valued, to finally believe you matter. But what if there was another way? What if everything you're doing for approval could be undone in silence? Because in silence, true power emerges. In stillness, authenticity speaks. And in letting go of the need to be seen, you finally become visible. Welcome to Psychra. You think you're in control, that your words, your image, your presence are expressions of freedom, your choices, your agency, your will. But what if none of it is truly yours? What if every smile, every calculated silence, every humble brag, every posted photo and curated phrase was a disguise you were trained to wear? Not for survival, but for belonging, for love, for worth. This is where the illusion begins. You've been taught that visibility is power, that if they see you, they'll value you, that success must be worn like armor, that strength must be broadcast, that the more eyes that land on you, the more real you become. But this belief is not strength, it's programming. Because the truth is far more disturbing. The need to be seen is often a sign that you don't believe you exist without an audience. And the louder you become in trying to prove your worth, the more quietly it slips through your fingers. You don't project power, you leak it. Not because you're weak, but because you've forgotten what true power actually feels like. There's a deep psychological mechanism hiding behind all this. It's something Carl Jung spent his life trying to uncover, what he called the persona, the mask we create unconsciously to navigate the social world, the polished image, the socially acceptable self, the likable, admirable, controlled version of you that others are allowed to see. And every time you show off, that mask grows tighter. But the persona is not evil. It's not malicious. It's protective. It's the defense system of a wounded psyche, the armor forged in moments of rejection, the performance rehearsed in childhood when attention became currency when acceptance became survival. You learned, perhaps without knowing, that being loved meant being impressive. So you became impressive. You learned the language of performance. You studied what got approval. You began to edit yourself for maximum reward. And the real you, the flawed, vulnerable, magnificent you, was quietly buried. And this is what they never told you. Every time you show off, you bury yourself deeper. Because showing off isn't about the other person seeing you. It's about you avoiding yourself. The self you left behind. The self you fear is not enough. So you replace that quiet truth with noise, with flash, with signals. But there's a silent truth here, one that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. He who must flaunt his power has already lost it. Machiavelli wrote not for the moral man, but for the man who wants to rule. And the first rule of power, he warned, is this: never reveal more than necessary, because mystery is leverage, and restraint is control. The moment you begin to advertise your strength, others will begin to test it. And when your identity depends on being perceived as powerful, the fear of being exposed will enslave you. That's the second illusion. That power comes from how others see you. It doesn't. Real power comes from how little you need to be seen. The more silent your confidence, the more deeply it's felt. The more invisible your influence, the more unshakable it becomes. The man who walks into a room and says nothing, yet shifts the energy, he's not performing, he's being. But you've been sold the opposite. You were told to market yourself, to brand your personality, to post your achievements, to become a spectacle. And so, piece by piece, you did. But deep inside, the cost became unbearable. Because now, you don't know who you are without the performance. This is the shadow of your reality. You've become a mirror, reflecting what others want to see. Yet you've never truly seen yourself. And when you do glimpse yourself in silence, it terrifies you. Because behind the mask, you find a man who feels hollow, not because he's broken, but because he's been performing for so long. He forgot he was never just a role. Here's the paradox. The more successful your performance, the more invisible your soul becomes. And the more you're praised for the mask, the more alienated you feel beneath it. Because it's not real. It was never real, it was strategic. And strategies, by definition, are not truth. They are adaptations. So now you live in a loop. Every interaction is a sales pitch. Every moment a calculation. Every silence is filled with internal noise. What do they think of me? Did that make me look strong? Did I sound smart enough? Did I seem confident? And, worst of all, do they see me? But they don't. Not because they can't, but because you've made it impossible. They see what you project. They feel what you conceal. They respond not to your truth, but to your defense mechanisms. And so you wonder why people pull away, why admiration feels hollow, why you're surrounded yet lonely, why success tastes like ash. It's because the version of you they love isn't you. It's the persona. And deep down, you know it. That's why you keep showing off. You're trying to keep the illusion alive, because if you stopped, even for a moment, you're afraid no one would stay. But here's what they never told you. The only way to be truly seen is to stop showing. Let go of the mask. Let go of the performance. Let go of the fear that you are unworthy without the symbols, the status, the admiration. Let go, and you'll find that the man underneath is more powerful than anything you pretended to be. Because there is something in you that doesn't need to be validated to exist. Something that was here before the applause, and will remain after the silence. But most people never find it. They can't. They're too afraid to stop performing, too afraid of the void beneath the persona. But what they don't realize is, the void isn't empty. It's full of truth, of presence, of soul. And when you finally face it, you stop needing to show off. Because now you are. You are what no one can take, what no one can fake, what no one can see until they feel it. And once you feel that power, you'll never flaunt again. Because real power doesn't chase attention. It commands it without a word. And yet, something even deeper waits beneath this truth. Something more unsettling, more disruptive. Because once you uncover the real reason behind your need to perform, you'll realize it didn't begin with society or strategy. It began with pain. And once you trace it back to its source, you will never look at yourself the same way again. There's a moment, silent, barely perceptible, when you realize you are not who you think you are. A flicker behind your actions, a hesitation in your confidence. It's the moment when the performance stutters, and something deeper watches from the shadows. This is the beginning of collapse, the unraveling of the lie you've been taught to live, not by accident, but by design. You were born into a system, a web of subtle domination, not through chains or violence, but through conditioning. And the most dangerous kind of control is the one that wears the mask of normal. From the moment you were old enough to speak, you were trained to conform, gently, invisibly, not forced but shaped, molded by praise, shamed by silence, rewarded for obedience, punished for authenticity. Your identity became a transaction. Be this, and you will be loved. And so you became what they needed you to be. Not because you were weak, but because you were human. You adapted. You learned to read the emotional weather in your home, your classroom, your friendships. But the cost of that adaptation was yourself. You see, you didn't grow into yourself. You grew into a performance. And the tragedy is, you don't even know it. Because the lie became the lens. And now, every thought you think, every decision you make, every desire you chase, comes from a self that was created to survive, not to be free. You call it personality, but it's actually protection. You call it ambition, but it's actually avoidance. Avoidance of shame, of inadequacy, of rejection. This is the cage most people live in. An unconscious prison where the bars are made of childhood wounds, social comparison, and invisible expectations. A prison where the ego pretends to be the self, and no one questions the difference. But now, something in you is beginning to question. That's why you're here. That's why the old ways of being are cracking. That's why success feels meaningless. That's why validation doesn't stick. That's why your accomplishments feel like echoes instead of arrival. Because the identity you built is not you. It's a mask stitched together by fear and applause. And once you begin to see this, there is no going back. This is what Carl Jung meant when he said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Why? Because the soul is not convenient. It is not socially optimized. It does not care for what makes you popular. It demands what makes you whole. And wholeness requires loss. The loss of the false self. The loss of the image you've protected for decades. The loss of certainty, of predictability, of control. Because once you pierce the veil of your constructed identity, you see the truth. Most of what you think is you is a reaction to pain. That calmness you perform, learned in chaos. That confidence you signal, born from neglect. That intellect you showcase, forged in emotional starvation. You are not broken, but you are fractured. And those fractures have become your personality. But now, as you begin to wake up, you feel something else, a quiet rebellion, a whisper behind the noise. It says, what if I don't need to be this anymore? What if the control you've tried so hard to maintain over how you look, what you say, how you're seen, is actually the reason you feel so powerless? Here's the paradox. The more you try to control your identity, the more it controls you. The tighter you grip your image, the more fragile it becomes. The more you chase confidence, the more you affirm its absence. And the more you need to be perceived a certain way, the less free you become. This is why letting go feels like death. Because in a way, it is. The death of the old self. The self that was manufactured to win love escape shame, and avoid abandonment. But that self, no matter how refined, will never feel like home. Because home is not performance. Home is truth. And truth doesn't need to be believed to exist. It simply is. The moment you stop performing, a strange silence enters your life. You feel empty, ungrounded, vulnerable. But what you're really feeling is the absence of the lie. And that absence is the beginning of clarity. You start to see how deeply the world is built on mutual performances. How we applaud the confident while ignoring the authentic. How we reward those who play the game over those who speak the truth. How the world doesn't want your soul, it wants your compliance. And most people give it willingly. Because the fear of being real is greater than the pain of being false. But if you're still here, listening to this, then some part of you is done with the game. Some part of you wants to stop selling yourself, to stop performing, to stop chasing shadows and start feeling the ground under your feet again. This is the second death, not just the loss of control, but the loss of the belief that you ever had it. Because when you see how thoroughly your identity has been shaped, by your traumas, your caregivers, your social programming, you begin to realize you didn't choose this self. It was assigned to you, and you played the role, convincingly, efficiently, until now. Because now, the mask is cracking, and the soul is peeking through. This is the point of no return. You've started to feel something underneath your constructed self, a deeper current, a sacred restlessness, not a desire to be more, but a desire to be true. And that truth, it cannot be faked, it cannot be bought, and it cannot be gained through manipulation or performance. It emerges only through surrender. But here's where most people stop. They taste this moment and turn back. Because to continue is to risk everything they've built. Their image, their identity, their control. But you're still listening, which means you're not most people, are you? You feel it now, don't you? That uncomfortable stirring. That restless energy moving through your chest. The way your thoughts are circling back to moments you'd rather forget. Times when you performed. When you said what you thought would impress. When you wore success like armor to hide the trembling underneath. This is not coincidence. This is recognition. Your soul is remembering what your mind has been trained to forget. That beneath every mask lies a wound. And beneath every wound lies a choice. Continue hiding or begin healing. Most people feel this moment and immediately reach for distraction. They check their phone. They make plans. They find reasons to be busy. Because stillness is where the truth lives, and truth is the one thing the false self cannot survive. But you're still here, which means something in you is ready to look. So let's look together. Think about the last time you showed off. The last time you name-dropped or flexed or performed your success. The last time you needed someone to witness your worth. Can you feel it? That subtle desperation underneath the confidence? That hunger for validation that no amount of admiration could ever fill? Now go deeper. What were you really trying to prove? Not to them, to yourself. Were you trying to prove you mattered? That you weren't invisible? That you had overcome something? That you were worthy of love? Keep going. When did you first learn that your worth was conditional? When did love become something you had to earn instead of something you simply were? When did your existence become a performance instead of a gift? This is where the real work begins. Section 3. Reflective shadow work and viewer activation. You feel it now, don't you? That uncomfortable stirring. That restless energy moving through your chest. The way your thoughts are circling back to moments you'd rather forget. Times when you performed. When you said what you thought would impress. When you wore success like armor to hide the trembling underneath. This is not coincidence. This is recognition. Your soul is remembering what your mind has been trained to forget. That beneath every mask lies a wound. And beneath every wound lies a choice. Continue hiding or begin healing. Most people feel this moment and immediately reach for distraction. They check their phone. They make plans. They find reasons to be busy. Because stillness is where the truth lives, and truth is the one thing the false self cannot survive. But you're still here, which means something in you is ready to look. So let's look together. Think about the last time you showed off. The last time you name-dropped, or flexed, or performed your success. The last time you needed someone to witness your worth. Can you feel it? That subtle desperation underneath the confidence? That hunger for validation that no amount of admiration could ever fill? Now go deeper. What were you really trying to prove? Not to them, to yourself. Were you trying to prove you mattered? That you weren't invisible? That you had overcome something? That you were worthy of love? Keep going. When did you first learn that your worth was conditional? When did love become something you had to earn instead of something you simply were? When did your existence become a performance instead of a gift? This is where the real work begins. Not in changing your behavior, but in understanding why you needed that behavior in the first place. Because every time you show off, you're not celebrating your success. You're medicating your wound, the wound of not being seen, of not being chosen, of not being enough. But here's what no one told you about wounds. They're not scars to be hidden. They're doorways to be entered. Because on the other side of every wound is a power that cannot be taken away. The power of knowing who you are when no one is watching. The power of being whole without external validation. The power of presence that doesn't need to announce itself. This is what the mystics called dying before you die. Not physical death, but ego death. The death of the constructed self. The death of the identity built on achievements, opinions, and social positioning. And in that death, something indestructible is born. Not confidence, but presence. Not charisma, but authenticity. Not power over others, but power with yourself. But to reach this place, you must first walk through the fire of your own resistance. You must face the parts of yourself you've been trying to outrun through performance, the insecurity, the loneliness, the fear that without your accomplishments, you are nothing. And when you finally sit with those feelings, really sit with them, without trying to fix them or escape them, something miraculous happens. They transform, not because you've defeated them, but because you've integrated them. Not because you've become stronger, but because you've become whole. This is the paradox of shadow work. The moment you stop running from your darkness, it stops chasing you. And suddenly, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Because you've made peace with the parts of yourself that felt unworthy. You've reclaimed the energy you were spending on performance and redirected it toward presence. Now, when you walk into a room, people feel something different. Not your need for validation, but your freedom from it. Not your hunger for attention, but your comfort in your own skin. Not your performance of confidence, but your embodiment of truth. And here's what happens next. They start to mirror that back to you. Not because you've manipulated them, but because authenticity is contagious. When someone is genuinely comfortable with themselves, it gives others permission to be comfortable too. This is true influence. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that commands respect. Not the kind that speaks loudest, but the kind that speaks truest. But most people never reach this point. They get glimpses of it in moments of quiet, in meditation, in nature, in love, but then they return to the world and put the mask back on, because the world seems to reward the performance more than the truth. But what if the world is wrong? What if the very thing you think makes you powerful, your ability to impress, to dazzle, to make others see you as successful, is the thing that's keeping you from real power? The power that comes not from what others think of you, but from what you know about yourself. And what you know, when the noise stops and the performance ends, is this. You are not your achievements. You are not your image. You are not what others think of you. You are the awareness that watches all of this. The consciousness that remains constant while everything else changes. The presence that was here before the mask and will be here after it crumbles. This is who you've been looking for in all the wrong places. Not in their eyes, but in your own silence. Not in their applause, but in your own approval. not in their validation, but in your own acceptance. And the moment you find this, truly find it, you stop needing to show off. Because what could you possibly show that would be more impressive than who you already are? What could you possibly prove that would be more valuable than what you already know? What could you possibly gain from their attention that would compare to the freedom of not needing it? This is the death that births true life, the surrender that creates real strength, the silence that speaks louder than any words. But there's one more layer to this, one final illusion that must be shattered before you can be completely free. Because even now, as you begin to taste this freedom, something in you might be thinking, yes, but how do I use this? How do I turn this insight into advantage? How do I make this work for me? And that thought, that subtle attempt to weaponize your awakening, is the ego's last stand. Its final attempt to co-opt your liberation and turn it into another performance. But true freedom cannot be used. It can only be lived. And living it requires the complete death of the one who would use it. The one who still believes that life is about getting something from others instead of giving something to the world. This is where it gets dangerous. Because once you see this final layer, you can never unsee it. And what you'll discover there will change everything you thought you knew about power, purpose, and what it means to be human. There is a moment in every awakening when you realize you have been living someone else's life. Not metaphorically, literally. The desires you thought were yours, planted by advertising, social conditioning, childhood wounds. The goals you've been chasing, inherited from parents who inherited them from their parents, in an endless chain of unlived lives. The very sense of I that you defend so fiercely, a collage of expectations, reactions, and borrowed identities. This is the most terrifying realization a human being can have. You are not who you think you are. You are who you were programmed to be. And the program is so sophisticated, so seamless, that it convinced you it was your own thinking. But now the program is glitching. Something is breaking through. And what's breaking through is so foreign to your constructed self that it feels like death approaching. Because it is death. The death of the ego, the death of the false self, the death of everything you thought was you. Most psychologists won't tell you this because they're trapped in the same illusion. They'll help you manage your anxiety, improve your relationships, optimize your performance. But they won't tell you the one truth that could actually set you free. The self you're trying to improve doesn't exist. It's a mirage, a hallucination, a story you've been telling yourself for so long that you forgot it was fiction. Carl Jung came close to this truth when he spoke of individuation, the process of becoming who you really are beneath the social mask. But even Jung hesitated to go all the way, because going all the way means acknowledging that the individual self, the ego, the I that thinks it's in control, is itself an illusion. Buddha knew this. He called it anatman, no self. The recognition that what we take to be our identity is actually a river of sensations, thoughts, and experiences with no fixed center, no permanent self to protect or promote. But this isn't philosophy. This is lived experience, and it's happening to you right now. That restlessness you feel, that sense that something is fundamentally wrong with the way you've been living, that growing awareness that all your achievements feel hollow, all your relationships feel performed, all your success feels borrowed from someone else's dreams. This is the ego beginning to dissolve. And your resistance to this dissolution, that's the ego's survival mechanism kicking in. It will do anything to maintain the illusion of separateness, of being a solid, consistent self that needs to be defended, promoted, and validated. This is why you show off. Not because you're confident, but because you're terrified of disappearing. The ego knows on some level that it's not real. And so it creates increasingly elaborate performances to convince itself and others of its existence. It needs constant confirmation that it matters, that it's seen, that it's worthy of attention. But attention is like oxygen to a dying fire. The more you feed it, the brighter it burns. But it never stops dying. because the ego is not built to last. It's a temporary construction, a survival mechanism that outlived its usefulness, and now it's time to let it go. But letting go feels impossible because you don't know what's on the other side. You've been the star of your own movie for so long that you can't imagine existing without being the center of the story. Who would you be without your achievements? Without your personality? Without your problems? Without your identity? The answer is both terrifying and liberating. You would be everything. Not everything in the sense of being special or important, but everything in the sense of being connected to the whole. No longer separate. No longer defending a fictional boundary between you and not you. This is what the mystics meant when they spoke of union with the divine. Not becoming God, but recognizing that the separation from God was always imaginary. The wave realizing it was always ocean. The drop discovering it was never separate from the sea. But to reach this recognition, you must first be willing to die. Not physically, but psychologically. You must be willing to let go of everything you think you are. Your story about yourself, your justifications, your defenses, your need to be right, to be seen, to be validated. All of it must go. And this is where most people turn back. Because ego death feels like annihilation. It feels like losing everything that makes life worth living. But what you discover on the other side is that you never had anything to lose. You only had an illusion to surrender. And when the illusion falls away, what remains is not emptiness, but fullness. Not death, but life. Not separation, but connection. You realize that the very thing you were trying to protect, your individual self, was the thing that was keeping you from experiencing your true nature. And your true nature is not small. It's not insecure. It doesn't need to show off because it has nothing to prove. It simply is. Present, aware, unshakable. This is the power that cannot be taken away because it was never given to you by anyone else. This is the confidence that needs no external validation because it comes from recognizing what you actually are. This is the freedom that emerges when you stop trying to be someone and start being. But here's the final twist, the one that changes everything. Once you die to the false self, you don't disappear. You don't become nothing, you become no-thing. And no-thing is not empty. It's the space in which all things appear, the awareness in which all experience happens, the consciousness that remains constant while everything else changes, the presence that has been watching your entire life unfold, including this very moment of recognition. This is who you really are, not the character in the story, but the awareness in which the story appears, not the performer, but the stage on which all performances happen, not the wave, but the ocean itself. And once you know this, truly know it, not just intellectually, but experientially, everything changes. You stop needing to show off because there's no separate self to promote. You stop seeking validation because you recognize yourself as the source of all validation. You stop performing because you realize you are the audience, the actor, and the play itself. This is the final piece of the puzzle, the one that makes everything else make sense, the one that transforms suffering into wisdom, performance into presence, and seeking into finding. But most people never reach this point. They get glimpses, in meditation, in love, in moments of natural beauty, but then they retreat back into the familiar prison of the separate self. Because living this truth requires courage. The courage to be no one, the courage to need nothing, the courage to exist without an agenda. And that courage, that changes everything. You are not the same person who began this journey. Something fundamental has shifted. Not in your circumstances, but in your relationship to them. Not in what you have, but in what you are. Not in how the world sees you, but in how you see through the world's illusions. The mask has fallen away. The performance has ended. And what remains is something that was always there but never recognized. Your true face. Not the face you show to others, but the face you had before you were born. The face that will remain after your body returns to dust. The face that is not a face at all, but pure awareness, looking out through these eyes, breathing through these lungs, experiencing life through this temporary form. This is what you've been searching for in all the wrong places. You looked for it in their approval, but it was in your own acceptance. You searched for it in achievement, but it was in your own being. You chased it through performance, but it was waiting in your silence. And now you understand why the showing off never worked, why the validation never lasted, why the success felt empty. Because you were trying to build a self that already existed. You were trying to become someone you already were. You were trying to earn what was your birthright. The suffering wasn't punishment, it was invitation. The emptiness wasn't evidence of your brokenness, it was the space through which your wholeness could emerge. The restlessness wasn't a problem to be solved, it was intelligence trying to wake you up. All of it, every moment of dissatisfaction, every craving for more, every desperate attempt to be seen, was your soul calling you home. Home to yourself, home to truth, home to the recognition that you are not separate from life. You are life expressing itself as you. This is individuation in its highest form. Not becoming special, but becoming authentic. Not standing out from the crowd, but standing as yourself. Not conquering others, but liberating yourself. And in that liberation, something miraculous happens. You stop needing to take from others because you recognize yourself as the source. You stop competing because you realize there's no competition for being you. You stop performing because you understand that your true nature is the greatest performance of all. But this transformation isn't just personal, it's revolutionary. Because when you stop showing off, you give others permission to stop performing too. When you embrace your authenticity, you make space for theirs. When you drop the mask, you invite them to do the same. This is how the world changes. Not through force or manipulation, but through example. Not by telling others what to do, but by showing them what's possible. Not by fixing the system, but by embodying the solution. One authentic person can shift the energy of an entire room. One individual who has stopped performing can inspire 1,000 others to drop their masks. One human being who has remembered their true nature can remind countless others of theirs. This is true influence. Not the kind that demands attention, but the kind that creates space. Not the kind that takes, but the kind that gives. Not the kind that separates, but the kind that connects. And it begins with you, with your willingness to stop the performance, to end the charade, to be who you actually are instead of who you think you should be. But here's what they never tell you about this transformation. It's not a destination, it's a way of being. It's not something you achieve once, it's something you choose again and again. It's not a state you maintain, it's a truth you remember. Because the ego doesn't die once and stay dead. It resurrects itself in subtle ways. It finds new strategies, new performances, new ways to seek validation. Sometimes it even turns spirituality into performance. Sometimes it makes awakening into another achievement. Sometimes it uses authenticity as a new kind of mask. This is why vigilance is required. Not the exhausting vigilance of self-control, but the gentle vigilance of self-awareness. The ability to catch yourself when you slip back into performance. The wisdom to laugh at the ego's clever attempts to rebuild itself. The compassion to forgive yourself when you forget who you really are. Because forgetting is part of the process, remembering is part of the journey. And the journey never truly ends, it just deepens. With each layer of illusion that falls away, more truth is revealed. With each mask that drops, more authenticity emerges. With each performance that ends, more presence is born. And slowly, gradually, naturally, you become what you've always been. A clear mirror reflecting reality as it is. A transparent window through which life experiences itself. A conscious expression of the same intelligence that moves the stars and grows the trees. This is your inheritance, not success, but being, not admiration, but love, not validation, but truth. And once you claim this inheritance, everything you touch is transformed. Your relationships become deeper because you're no longer hiding. Your work becomes more meaningful because you're no longer performing. Your presence becomes more powerful because you're no longer pretending. You don't need to show off anymore because you have nothing to prove. You don't need their attention because you have your own. You don't need their approval because you approve of yourself. And in that self-approval, not the shallow self-esteem of the ego, but the deep self-recognition of the soul, you find something that cannot be taken away, cannot be diminished, cannot be lost. You find yourself, the real you, the eternal you, the you that was never born and will never die. The you that is reading these words right now. This is who you've been all along. This is who you'll always be. This is who you are when the performance ends and the truth begins. Now you understand why Machiavelli was wrong, at least partially. He understood power, but he didn't understand presence. He grasped strategy, but he missed soul. He knew how to influence others, but he forgot the most important influence of all, the influence you have on yourself. Because when you stop showing off and start being yourself, you don't lose power, you find it. You don't become invisible, you become luminous. You don't disappear, you finally appear as yourself. For the first time and for all time. The performance is over, the curtain has fallen, and what remains is not emptiness but everything. You are not the same person who pressed play, and you never will be again. Because now you know, you were never that person at all. You were always this, always whole. Always enough, always home. Welcome to yourself. Welcome to truth. Welcome to freedom. The real performance begins now.